what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 24/7. I am Cody Goodwin. We've got the whole band back together for today's show with Mike Rodak and Alex Scarborough. It is officially week 0, fellas. We made it. From now through late January, there will be meaningful football games to watch every single week, whether you're a college football fan or an NFL fan, or like me, if you're both. For our purposes here, Alabama is entering its final week of fall camp. There are 12 more days until the Crimson Tide season opener against Western Kentucky. That's August 31st, 6 p.m. kickoff at Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. ESPN is going to carry that broadcast. We'll touch more on that game specifically next week. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit more about fall camp. Alabama is 15 practices in. They have 5 more to go. We've learned a lot over the last 3 weeks, thanks to viewing practices, talking with coaches and players, as well as scrimmage intel. And we'll talk about that. We've also still got some questions, and we'll ponder some of those as well. We're going to start with lessons learned as we look back over the last couple of weeks of fall camp. What's like one big thing, important thing, or an interesting thing that you've maybe learned about 2024 Alabama? Mike, I'll throw it to you first. What's a big picture lesson or something that you found interesting over the last couple of weeks?
I'll go with, the injury aspect of it. I don't think you learn a whole lot. Like the second half of fall camp is usually, like we talked about the last show that I was on, like you're starting to look forward towards some other opponents. You're ramping things down a little bit for some guys that are veterans and might be banged up a little bit. I think that's really the biggest thing that I've learned the last week is, there's players that are a little bit banged up, and Jaden Roberts, I think, is probably number one on that list in terms of having hand surgery, missing the scrimmage. He did not do much when we were out there for the fan day practice a week ago. Tyler Brooker also did not do much, and that's veteran situation as well. Jim Miller has been out, and that day they only had one healthy running back because Richard Young was also out that day, and Daniel Hill had his arm in a sling, and Kevin Riley was out that day. So it's, again, you're just trying to stay healthy at this point. Like, I don't know if you're going to learn a whole lot new. Things aren't going to change a whole lot between now and August 31st when they hit the field against Western Kentucky. You're just trying to make sure your team is healthy and ready to go. That's, again, it's for their sake. They've been very lucky in terms of fall camp injuries. They've avoided any sort of big season-altering sort of injury. We've seen it happen in Texas, with TJ Baxter. We've seen it happen in other places with some offensive tackles. I think Notre Dame is one. And just trying to have that situation not crop up. I talked about the last show, but it happened in 2019. I remember my first summer, Dylan Moses goes down, Trey Sanders goes down, who was a 5-star freshman coming in, people were excited about. And then in addition to Dylan Moses, they also lost Josh McMillan to an ACL that summer. And those potentially might have been their 2 starters. And instead they had to start 2 freshmen in Shane Lee and Christian Harris. And that ended up biting them, especially the LSU game that year. So you're just trying to stay on, I'll say, the straight and narrow, but you're just trying to stay healthy between now and August 31st. And I think they've accomplished that with the caveat that they have a few guys that are being held out. So that's really number one for me. I think even Kalen DeBoer was asked, was it last weekend, what's your top concern? And he said health, which I think reflects just kind of where he's at, where the hay's not completely in the barn, but again, we're not going to learn a whole lot new between now and the next 2 weeks here.
I think bringing up the like Notre Dame injuries, the Texas injuries specifically, right? They had 2 running backs go down with what appears to be season-ending injuries, and that's pretty big. And I know that the running back room, especially here at Alabama, they're excited about it. Obviously, right? You got Justice and Jam. Richard Young is a really good third option. They're excited about the 2 freshmen. Like, now it's kind of a good thing that you have that depth, right? Because Justice was the only scholarship running back to really go through workouts over the last week or so. Young got a little bit more run in the second scrimmage. Like, that depth it's been tested here through the latter stages of fall camp. It may get tested through the first couple of weeks, depending on how bad Jam's injury is. DeBoer didn't seem terribly worried about it. Both him and Jaden Roberts were held out of the scrimmage. It sounds like if they needed to play, they would have played, but it's a scrimmage. So just let's take it easy and get ready for week 1. Alex, I'm curious your thoughts just overall on the subject of health for Alabama, because in addition to some of those injuries, even DeBoer said after the scrimmage on Saturday, the second close scrimmage, that that scrimmage was maybe as physical of a workout that he has seen from his guys. And so, that makes me think they're probably going to take it significantly easier as they navigate these final 5 practices. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a different outlook on managing practice. I'm reminded of spring when a few different times Kalen DeBoer said the number one thing is we got to take care of each other. Not really a thing you heard Nick Saban talk about very much, but just the idea that, look, things are going to happen, but we need to be conscious of how we're offense versus defense and vice versa, and not putting ourselves in a bad situation. Has that helped them avoid the injury bug so far? I don't know. You hope that it continues that way because you want to see what they're like full force. But at the same time, as much as the Roberts injury in itself does not worry me necessarily because everybody's on the same page about him being back for week one, there is still a competition at that right tackle spot, and you'd like to see some chemistry develop there because of the communication and everything that's sort of required. So running back doesn't worry me quite so much because you just get those guys on the field. They've played before. They know what they're doing. The domino effect of the Roberts injury over these next few weeks, while minor, I do wonder if it has some sort of impact, especially in terms of knocking off the rust those first few games.
I think that's fair. And depth also tested with the interior too. So a guy like Geno Vandermark, who came in from Michigan State, he got quite a bit of run in the scrimmage, and interior depth, or at least experienced interior depth, was something of a worry, a question mark coming out of spring practices. So being able to have a guy like Geno, who's got starting experience, may not be as quite as high level as a Jaden Roberts, but he does have that experience and is able to maybe step in as a swing guard spot. So depth being tested here for Alabama, which could pay dividends as we navigate the season. I know that's something that DeBoer had talked about, just making sure that they've got enough bodies to navigate an SEC schedule, especially with just the importance of making sure that everybody is as healthy as possible going into the playoff should they qualify. So interesting little subplot here at the end of fall camp. Alex, I'm curious, what's maybe the biggest thing or biggest takeaway that you've learned through the last couple weeks of fall camp?
So 2 things have stood out to me. One, not really a surprise, but Proctor locking down that left tackle spot. We were expecting that, but you got to earn it back, and what that means. Now, would I have liked Elijah Pritchett or Woken Formby to lock down the right tackle spot and we could move on? Yeah, but at least you got one of those, and you can sort of build off of that, and it gives you confidence that despite his time away, he did the most with it. He came in a good spot. So you're good about that. The other thing that sort of stood out is in terms of receiver, I think depth is the key, but who's going to be the guy? Because every scrimmage, it's somebody different. And you don't get that constant, oh, this guy keeps making plays. Ryan Williams is obviously a guy, but maybe it's the way they're structured. You don't want to read too much into practice sometimes because a lot of it's situational. But the lack of a guy just utterly blowing it up makes me wonder, is this going to be a thing where they sort of figure out pecking order into the first few weeks of the season? Because that's been a thing that we've discussed, is like just solidifying who is that 1, 2, 3, and then moving on from there. If various guys are making play, that's a good problem to have, but it's also wondering who that alpha will be.
Clearly, it's Cole Adams. I mean, Cole Adams is their number one guy, and then they're just going to go down from there. So I don't think we need even talk about it. I mean, it's obvious.
He's a reliable option.
That's right. Look, and to I guess talk about that for real, I think Ryan Williams will be the number one guy, and I think it can happen quickly. But it's still one of those things, like, until we see it, like, seeing is believing. Like, we have to still see it on the field the first couple weeks. But like Jeremy Bernard, I think we're all offseason, we were talking about him as the number one guy too. So I think those 2 guys are your 1 and 2. And I think it's trying to figure out 3 and 4 and 5 and kind of what order that goes in. And I think Kendrick Law's up there. I think Cole Adams is up there. I think Kobe Prentice is up there. Listening to Nick Sheridan the other day about Emmanuel Henderson, it wasn't as encouraging. Like, I would probably slot him at number 6. And maybe there's a threat there from some of the younger guys, whether it's Rico Scott or Caleb Odom or whoever. But again, you're not going to play 8 different receivers. I know people like to get excited about some of the guys lower down in the depth chart. But like, when push comes to shove and you're in the fourth quarter of the Georgia game trying to win it, you're going to have 2 or 3 receivers on the field every play, and you're not probably going to change that up much. And I think 2 of those are going to be Bernard and Ryan Williams. It's really the question of who the third would be, to me.
The absolute best you can hope for is what Washington did last year in terms of having 3 flat out playmakers and then a fourth in Bernard who you can get, 35, 38 catches.
Right.
4 is probably the max, and maybe you get a tight end or some kind of situational player. But no, there's only so many balls to go around.
So I got some thoughts on the after the scrimmage and just general thoughts on what a possible receiver rotation could look like. So I think you can probably put it in pen that Jeremy's going to be the X. Like, he's just going to be that dude. He knows the offense. He understands what's required. He played in it last year. We're recording this on Monday. I think it was ESPNU had a replay of the Pac-12 championship game last year. Jeremy scored a touchdown in that game. I don't know if you guys saw that, but also had a fantastic punt return that set up another touchdown. So, like, good player. Put him in at the X. I think from there, if Ryan Williams truly is the dude that we believe he will be, you could probably put him in at the Y, and then you have Kobe Prentice / Cole Adams at that, at the slot position, and then probably CJ Dupree at the tight end H, right? If you want to slow play Williams a little bit, you could put Kendrick Law at the Y, bring Williams along either in the slot or opposite Law, or you want to bring on 4 receivers, right? And then you can still do the Kobe Prentice, Cole Adams thing, or because of his size, right? Williams has put on, I think it looks like 10, 15 pounds of good weight. You could do Jeremy at the X, Law at the Y, Williams in the slot. Williams is kind of versatile enough that I think you could probably move him between a couple of those different positions. I think Jeremy's a little bit versatile enough that you could probably move him throughout any of the lineups. So then you could put potentially Law or Williams if he's that good at the X position. Just kind of depends on what the coaches are feeling. But I think if they had to play a game tomorrow, Jeremy at the X, my guess would be Ryan Williams at the Y, and then probably Kobe / Cole Adams in that slot position with Dupree at tight end. What do we think about that?
I think we're selling Kendrick Law a little short. That's the
he's a prove-it guy for me. Naturally I'm going to do that.
Yeah, but because of his physical gifts and because of the time he has in the program, I think he's going to get an early nod, and I think probably slow play the younger guys. That's just the thing that stood out to me from hearing you talk. It's totally plausible. I have a hard time envisioning, given all that we heard about Kendrick Law throughout the spring and up to this point, that he won't get a significant run at receiver, whatever position it is, because he's a guy who I think could do really well in the slot as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially and this is more of a football X's and O's nerd conversation, but there's a lot of teams, especially in the NFL, but we're starting to see it trickle down a little bit to the college level as well. They'll put their X receiver in the slot just to force defenses to either show their hand a little bit more or make them squirm pre-snap. So that wouldn't shock me at all if you want to put like a Jeremy or a Kendrick Law, because of how physically imposing they can be in the slot, which allows you to put Williams on the outside. And then maybe you put, whoever's not in the slot between Jeremy and Law on the other side. So I don't know. Mike, how do you feel about Jeremy at the X, Williams at the Y, Kobe Prentice in the slot?
Well, first of all, I think, and I don't have access to DeBoer's playbook, I think traditionally the tight end is typically the Y. The H is more, it could be an H-back, it could be Robbie Oots, or it could be a slot receiver. So typically you have the X and the Z, and then the H would be the slot. I don't know for sure if that's what DeBoer's playbook looks like, but I think Y is typically your inline tight end. So that Y, thinking that this case would be Dupree. And then I think H would be Robbie Oots, because I think you're going to be playing him more than people think, because they're going to be trying to run the ball and also protect their tackles. But when you're actually in a 3 receiver set, I think Cole Adams, for real, I think has a shot to play that slot receiver role. I think I'm not going to go crazy over him, but I'm going to take Jamarcus Shepard at his face value, at his word, and I'm going to take what I saw, the one open practice we've had, the Sunday fan day that we were at. Cole Adams was lining up with the first team every single play in the slot. Was that just for one day, or has that happened every single day in practice? I'm sure there's been some amount of rotation, but if he's the guy that fits that role and with what they want to do and have him go over the middle and get 5 or 6 yards, then I think we're going to see him a decent amount. Even if Kendrick Law is physically better and more experienced, like I think it could be a mix. I think Kobe Prentice could get some looks still in that slot role. I mean, if you look at how they line up in practice for drills, like, and we've been out there for 7 or 8 practices now, like you have X, Y in the slot. You have XZ in the slot, I should say. And their slot receivers, every time you've been out there, Prentice, Cole Adams, your 1 and 2 guys, and then Law has been outside with Williams and Bernard and Henderson as the top 4 outside receivers. Does that mean they're going to line up every single play outside or inside? No, I think they want versatility, but I'll also take kind of what DeBoer has said about Ryan Williams at face value too, and that he's done everything to be ready at this point. Like they're not necessarily going to say, hey, you're a freshman, we're not going to play you as much because you're a freshman, and for no other good reason. And I'll take what I saw on Fan Day, which was Ryan Williams lining up with the first team every snap we saw. And I think Bernard was out there with the first team every time too. I don't want to make that gospel, but I think it meshes with what we've heard and seen too. So if you're asking me, day one, Western Kentucky, run the first play, again, I think there's a chance they're in a 2 tight end set because they're probably going to be running the ball on 1st and 10 to start that game. But if they are in a 3 receiver set and you're telling me it's Bernard, Williams, and Adams, then I wouldn't be shocked. If you're telling me it's Bernard, Williams, and Law, I wouldn't be shocked. If you're telling me it's Bernard, Law, and Prentice, I wouldn't be shocked. I think it can be one of those combinations, and it could change the very next play, but that's kind of where I'm at on that.
I think that's good intel. And also, I just want to point out that courtesy of our friends at EA Sports, you do have access to DeBoer's playbook via the college football 25 game. So, don't tell me you don't.
I couldn't tell if DeBoer was being serious when he said that the other day. Whoever show it was the Golick show, when he said that players they already know the reads for plays because, the passing game reads because they've been playing the video game. I mean, I'm sure like EA Sports sat down and tracked out all of Washington's plays and drew them out, but we'll see. I don't know if they label it as X, Y. I would have to look in the game. I've only played it a little bit. It's just mostly my son chucking up deep balls to Cole Adams and getting picked off half the time. So like father, like son, right?
I knew the Cole Adams influence was coming somewhere.
Yeah, they have a couple of like specific play calls for like X and Y receivers that are like in the actual play calls when you go to select them. But in terms of like who plays what position, like you can dictate the depth chart in terms of like the hierarchy and where you want to put guys. And
believe me, I've changed it.
That's is Cole Adams your Heisman winner in your
I had to move out. I don't know whoever it was. LaMarcus Fox.
LaMarcus, he's a D lineman, I'm pretty sure. I think LaMarcus Fox is Tim Smith.
Right. I noticed Tim Smith wasn't in there. Like every single time I run a play, Keon Keeley's on the field, which I just don't know if we're going to see that in real life. Not to be mean or anything, but like I just don't know. Like he's probably the 3rd guy at that position, so much more likely we're going to see LT Overton and Jamarian Latham out there. But for some reason, he played the game, and Keon Keeley's out there every single play.
And he's very good, by the way. Like he's like the game has souped up Keon Keeley. Like he's a monster in that game if you let him. Anyway, back on track. The battle at right tackle. I wanted to return to that because I think that was an interesting thing that I learned over the last week. Not specifically that it is a battle per se, but I'd like to think Wilkin Formby, I think, is very much in the lead for that specific role. I wanted to read off a couple of quotes that we heard from this past week. DeBoer said, until we get some game time reps, I don't know if we will have it completely ironed out just based on how it's gone so far. I don't feel like either of them are a liability, which seems like good news. It's just a matter of figuring out which one is going to be the guy. What's separating them? Here's the scouting report from offensive line coach Chris Kapilovich. Wilkin is great at understanding the scheme and what we need to get accomplished. He makes good calls. He has the tools to be a very good player. Pritchett plays with a little edge to him. He can be physically dominating. When that shows up, he does a really nice job in pass protection in the run game. So we're looking for a little more push from Wilkin, a little more consistency from Pritchett, and then we'd have 2 really good players. What stuck out to me about that quote specifically was that Wilkin understands the scheme and what needs to be accomplished. And I wonder if just that, he may not have his eye of a ceiling in terms of like, athletic ability as Pritchett does, but I do believe he has a little bit of a higher floor. And I think that consistency probably gives Wilkin the inside track, at least right now as we're recording this, to be the day one starter at right tackle. That's what I think. What do you guys think?
It wouldn't surprise me, but if you're giving me a bet who's going to start more games this season, I think it ends up being Pritchett, because you do need that athleticism. You do want that edge. You need those things. And he's at a position where it's not center, it's not left tackle. They're not that, you can make a little bit of a mistake, and you got Jalen Miller who can run away from it. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Pritchett, but Formby has made this a battle. And I think that's really interesting in itself, and shows what the depth can look like long term at that position as well. But end of the day, I just go with my gut, and I think it's going to be Pritchett.
If Pritchett ends up being the guy, whether it's week one or after the bye against Georgia or somewhere in the middle of the season or whenever they decide to make that decision, he does have that higher ceiling because 5-star guy, there is a little bit more athleticism there. Even Kapilovic said he's a little bit of a nastier offensive lineman. You want that, especially in DeBoer's offense where these guys are moving around and they're going to hit guys in space. That I think makes a lot of sense in terms of like the long-term play here. Mike, I'm curious what you think about the battle at right tackle, what Kapilovic said about them. How do you see this playing out if you had to make a guess?
Yeah, I wasn't there for Kapilovic, but I listened to him back, and I think he mentioned that, why not continue the battle? It doesn't necessarily have to be settled. You only play one guy against Western Kentucky, and it's something Saban would always say, like, position battles don't end when fall camp ends. I think that's what he mentioned about quarterback last year. Did not go well in that particular regard. But I think in right tackle, and they did this at left tackle last year, they rotated Proctor and Pritchett, whatever it was, like 2 series for Proctor and 1 for Pritchett, or 3 and 1, whatever it was. I think we're probably going to see something like that when they, especially the first 2 games where you can probably get away with it a little bit more. Whether it's Formby for a drive or Formby for 2 drives or a quarter, and then you play Pritchett. You just try to get some more data points in an actual live, game setting. And then you sit down after that and decide who's going to play in Wisconsin. And I will not discount the value of Jaden Roberts' opinion once he gets back on the field. Like, I think DeBoer puts a lot of stock in the communication aspect, the comfort aspect of who does my guard want next to him at tackle? Who does he trust more? I think that's the case at left tackle with Booker. And I think, or left guard with Booker and the left tackle. And you have 2 veteran guards that, I think are really good and he trusts a lot. So I think Robert's opinion of, does he trust Formby more? Does he trust Pritchett more to his right? I think is going to have a lot of weight. And the fact that Roberts hasn't been out there, kind of disrupts that a little bit. But I don't think you need to say for sure, like, we need a guy. We need that position to be fully settled probably until the Wisconsin game. And then even then, like, if the Wisconsin game goes well, you're probably going to try to get the other guys some more time too in that environment on the road. With communication being a little bit different. So, and then you have a bye week. And then you can probably run them more in practice with both of them. And then you decide going to the Georgia game. So I think this is still a several-week process here where you don't have to make an announcement on August 24th, and they'll have a depth chart 1 week from today, theoretically.
Theoretically.
It could be an or. The Nick Saban or factory could still be running, but I don't think it needs to be a written in an ink sort of declaration that here's our right tackle right away.
See, I agree with that, but I also, if it's not a clear answer coming out of week 2, I'm getting antsy because I don't want to rotate on the road in Wisconsin. I just don't. I don't. Knowing the communication struggles that can go on there for a good offensive line, I want it to be settled. And then, of course, the Georgia game, you need to know what you're doing. So, you can mess around the first couple of weeks. It's fine. But to me, it's the old. I think Cody, you brought it up on the last one. If you don't have 2, if you've got 2, you don't have 1. I want to just have 1 and know who I'm rolling with. And if the other guy is battled and just missed out, then so be it. Those reps and that chemistry needs to be there in the communication.
I agree. And I think, whoever starts week 1 may not finish week 1. Whoever starts week 1 may not start week 2. I do agree that they have a little bit of time to hash it out. But I'm also of the agreement that I think you want that settled, especially before they go to Wisconsin. So, and it sounds like DeBoer's okay with it lingering in. I know Kapilovic has said that. I believe Sheridan has said some variation of that as well, that they're okay kind of shuffling guys early into the season. But generally agree, like, especially before you go to Camp Randall at Wisconsin, that is something that you really want to have, maybe not set in stone, but like, let's start one guy at Wisconsin, see how he does, reevaluate over the bye week. What does it mean for Georgia?
And just to quote DeBoer in that, he said, just going to be a position, I think, until we really get to some game time reps. I don't know if we will have it completely ironed out just based on how it's gone so far. Yeah, it kind of sounds like quarterback last year, where it's like, we don't really know.
Yeah.
No guys really separated. But it does seem like Caden Proctor has settled into that left tackle role where at the start of camp, it was like a three-way sort of rotation. Now it's just Proctor's your left tackle and you're rotating it right.
That's a good transition. Clearly, we all still have some lingering questions as Alabama navigates the final week of fall camp. So I figured the second half of today's show is just to discuss some of those lingering questions. We've already talked about the tackle battle. We have talked about a lot of different position battles and just questions that we have throughout the last month. As we enter the last week of fall camp, Alex, I'll let you start. What's a lingering question that you still have about the Alabama football team?
Yeah, I wish I had a hat to put on and crown myself Captain Obvious, but it's Jalen Milroe. It's about along the same vein of where's the breakout receiver. We just haven't heard a lot about Jalen Milroe coming out of the scrimmages. Again, that does not mean that he's having a bad scrimmage. It does not mean it could very well be situational. It could very well be Ty Simpson's taking some reps to get him further his development. But we just don't know. We haven't heard him tearing it up. So until we see it, it's going to be like, okay, what's it going to be with him? What's that development going to look like? Everybody's saying all the right things in terms of being on the same page, whether you're talking about Jalen meshing with the new staff meshing with him and recognizing his talent and upside. But we got to see it. And until we do, it's going to be a significant question mark for me. And I don't think we're going to get an answer until a week or two into the season. That's fine, but it doesn't mean it's not something lingering in the back of my head, because I do think this team will go as he goes. The ball's going to run through him. So let's see where that progression lands.
It sounds like, based on everything we've heard over the course of fall camp, that he feels good. Jalen Milroe feels good about the way the offense is coming along, how he's meshing with DeBoer and Sheridan. I know I've said this before. I subscribe to the theory that if they feel good, I feel good. Is that something that maybe you guys also agree with? But I mean, how do you feel about just the idea of we got to see it from Milroe first before we really fully believe it?
Well, I don't know if they would say they don't feel good. I think that's the kind of the question, is like, you have to read between the lines sometimes on some of that stuff. They're not going to come out and say, hey, we're not too sure. I mean, Nick Saban to some degree actually did that. Like, people can complain about like Nick Saban being, and I don't even know if that's true, but like, a little bit buttoned up coach speak sometimes, but there's also times when I'm like, if he wasn't happy, like you can tell he wasn't happy with something. So, I mean, my particular answer, if you're asking me the question of like, what am I looking for the next 2 weeks, is the exact same as Alex. Like, I think and I've talked about it time and time again. I've been asked about it on the radio like 4 different times in the past week. Like, what do you expect out of Jalen Milroe? My answer is, I don't know. And the last time we saw him on the field, like, it was not good enough to win a national title. Like, I'm not saying it's Jalen Milroe's fault that they lost to Michigan. There's a lot of other things that happened in that game, but like, that wasn't a national championship sort of quarterback performance. So that, do you suddenly get that in a new offense? Do you get that with different receivers around you? I don't know. That's the thing. And it's a big, big deal. Like, that's, the team will go as Jalen Milroe goes. And there's going to be a potential stress point pretty early if they don't win at Wisconsin, or if they don't win or against Georgia, if they don't win both games in particular. Like, that will be a big, huge storyline going into October, is the quarterback position. And then I think you start to get into a messy sort of situation with people calling for Ty Simpson, and how the locker room handles, the whole quarterback controversy. It did not go well last September when that happened. And, Jalen Milroe was a leader on this team. And even, there's a podcast with the team psychiatrist. I would have to check his title. Brett McCabe, and they had it was the Next Round podcast, and they had Jalen Murrow on the show with McCabe. And McCabe knows these players well. Like, he's in those rooms with them. And I think I wish I could have the exact quote in front of me, but he made reference to Milrow not handling that situation well last year when he was benched and when there was quarterback controversy. So I don't want to say Milrow won't handle it well if there is a controversy, if they lose a game or two in September and people are calling for Ty Simpson, but there is some history there. So sort of the dynamics, the locker room dynamics, the personality management aspect of it, I think it could potentially be really interesting if Milrow does not play well and if they lose one or two of those games, two of them especially, Wisconsin and Georgia. So again, we'll just have to see. They could win both. And then, you win the Georgia game, you're going into October 4-0, having beaten the number one team in the country. Like, Jalen Murrow, you can start building the statue outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium. Like, people are going to be riding high if that happens. So there is a wide range of outcomes. I think the fact that Ty Simpson is still here and has just kind of hung around and gotten better, and every time you ask about him, he looks pretty good. Like, that's going to mean something at some point. And whether it's at the end of the season or in the middle of the season, I think is a huge lingering question to me.
I mean, there's the Ty Simpson thing. I don't view it as conspiratorially, in the fact that, look, why wouldn't you stick around when you're going to have Ryan Williams and Caleb Odom at receiver? You're going to have, Parker Brailsford back, Caden Proctor back. You're going to have all these pieces. This offense should be good, no matter who the quarterback is next year. But look, on this podcast, I said that Jalen Milrow can be the best quarterback in the SEC. I believe that, but I do think that a lot of the discussion this whole offseason, maybe it's too big of a discussion for this podcast right now, but we've kind of brushed over the fact that there's enormous change. This is an entirely new system. And look, I expect it to work, but you also have to recognize that all that newness can create a messy situation at the same time. And whether a quarterback can fit into that, whether an offensive line can fit into that, we just need to see it. So, again, when you're not hearing coming out of scrimmages or practices, Jalen Milrow just demolished us today. That lingers. So, just want to see it. It doesn't mean it's not going to work, but I think we just have to acknowledge that broader thing of this is a big thing that's happened this offseason, and there is some doubt that comes along with that.
Oh yeah, there absolutely is, and it's we heard it from Tyler Booker last year, where they did not start well on the offensive line, as we all know, and September didn't go well. And Tyler Booker kept saying, "Just give us time. Everything's new. It's Tommy Reese who's new, and we have a new left tackle, and things are just different." And it, to some degree, like, it did get better over the course of the season. To some degree, it didn't, but again, I think you lose 2 games in September, the sky is going to be falling around here. Not necessarily justifiably, but like, that's going to be a big deal in Alabama if they're 2-2 going into October. So, you can have some runway to have it get better over the course of the season, but I agree. Like, everything is going to be new, and you have to make sure it's all going to work pretty early.
The idea that there's so much newness specifically around Milrow is an important point to make, and one that, you're right, Alex, we probably have glossed over that a little bit, because when you look back at last season, like, his top 3 receivers / the top 3 guys he targeted last year are all gone. His top 2 running backs are both gone. His starting right tackle is now gone. Like, there's a little bit of stability and a lot of talent on the offensive line. So that helps. But I mean, he's already said that he has an idea of who his go-to receiver is going to be. Who is that? We don't know yet. It could be the slot guy. It could be Ryan Williams. It could be Jeremy Bernard. I think that's who we all think it's probably going to be, just because of his, familiarity with the offense. It could be the tight ends, for all we know. Like, those guys just were not used at all last year. How are they going to be used in the offense this year? Is that going to be like the safety valve for Milrow if the receivers are covered for whatever reason? There is a lot of newness there. That's not something we have really touched on a lot, but it is an important point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is kind of while we're really excited for what we think it might look like and what Milrow could ultimately become in an offense like this, with an offensive brain trust like that, yeah, like there is, maybe we should pump the brakes for a minute or two. That's an important point, I feel like.
And I would agree with Alex that there hasn't been Jalen Milroe's lighting it up sort of storylines, this summer, whether it's been practice or the scrimmages either. And again, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I try not to read too much into scrimmage results because there's sometimes a lot of context that's missing as well. But it hasn't been like this guy is, Heisman worthy, all over the map in terms of like what exactly to expect with him. I think it's a tough question to answer too. Like I said, I've gotten asked about it on the radio. Like Milroe's a tough question to pin down right now, just because you don't know what exactly it's going to look like. You don't know if this is going to be Kalen DeBoer's offense from Washington, where you're going to see a lot of precision passing, and you don't know if they're going to really change it, maybe to make it look more like what we've seen in the past with Milroe and more design runs and option runs. Like that's part of it too. Like we don't know exactly what this is going to look like. So there's just a lot of unknown still at this point, and that's by design. Like, they're not going to tip their hand or show anything there. So we'll see.
And maybe this is too inside baseball, but I do think there might be something a little bit to who is delivering the message when it comes to the quarterback position, and the fact that Nick Sheridan is one of the most reserved of the coaches in terms of parsing out praise. He seems very reluctant to do that. Every time we ask about Jalen Milroe, it's a broader conversation about all the quarterbacks. Some other position coaches are less likely to do that. So part of that might just be the fact that Sheridan's not wired to come out and tell you, hey, Jalen's going to win the Heisman this year. So I think that should be acknowledged as well in this conversation.
All truth will be revealed in 12 days on week 1. The one lingering question I had, and it's because we've heard just a lot of different things, I guess, coming out about the defense. But DeBoer I raised my eyebrows a little bit when he said after the second scrimmage that the defensive line continues to do really well stopping the run. He also made an interesting point that there were some times, much like last week, this is an exact quote from DeBoer from Saturday, when the defense got to the quarterback and finished drives off. A lot of times, those are in your third down situations, third down, back to the wall, they got home. My lingering question is, who in the world is starting at Wolf? Because we've heard throughout the duration of fall camp that no matter who's there seems to be a consistent pass rush. Okay, that's either good because these guys are playmakers, or that's bad because the offensive line just hasn't figured out some stuff yet. And for the second scrimmage in a row, he's been very complimentary, DeBoer, about the defense finding a way to stop the run, which a lot of that is probably on the D-line, guys like Tim Keenan, Jaheim Otis, Tim Smith, the guys at Bandit. But also, like, I know that the outside linebackers, that Wolf position plays a role in stopping the run as well. Like, I know that they're pretty important when it comes to run fits and stuff like that. So you combine all that together, they're doing well stopping the run. They're doing well, getting better as the scrimmages and games go along. We saw that a lot during A-Day too, where the offense kind of lit them up through the first few drives, and then they settled in and forced quite a few 3-and-outs in the second half of that scrimmage. That seems to be the script that they followed during the last 2 close scrimmages this last month. So we know who's on the D-line. We know who those main characters are. We know who the 2 ass kickers at Bandit are. Who's starting at Wolf, man? Like, is it a by committee thing? Is Q Robinson that good and we're just like not giving him enough credit? Is Keanu Cott and Quay Russaw, like, are they the dudes that have usurped him in some capacity? I don't know. Clearly, by the tone of my voice, it sounds like it's bothering me quite a bit, and it really isn't keeping me up at night. But like, I'm just curious, like, who is the dude?
I think it's none of the above. I don't think necessarily Q Robinson's like, secret weapon. I don't know if Keanu Cott or Quay Russaw is like usurped them either. I think it's just we're probably going to see Q Russaw. Can't even talk this morning. Q Robinson on the field, probably the first snap that they play on defense against Western Kentucky. I would be surprised if it wasn't Q Robinson. But you're going to be in different packages too. Like Western Kentucky runs the air raid system with Tyson Helton. Am I right, Alex? My brain is warped. Okay. Yeah. You get the Brian Ellis connection there. We should write about that next week, I guess.
Don't give away all our secrets.
I know, right? But you're probably going to be in like a dime defense. I would imagine. If I'm thinking of like how Saban ran against the air raid of Mississippi State, they were in dime like the entire time, and so your 4-2 look might be different. Like you could have Robinson and Keanu Codd up there. You could have Overton and Latham. You could have Overton and Codd. Like I think it'll be a mix and match. Like each play might be a little bit different. I don't know if there's going to be a surefire answer on like, this is your Wolf. He's going to be out there every single play. Like, I don't think it will be like that. I do think it's more by a committee sort of situation. And Rusaw probably factors in there, maybe a few snaps here and there. But again, I would be surprised if it wasn't Robinson on the first play, but kind of a rotation after that.
That's going to be the consistent feedback I've gotten is that there's not a dude, but that doesn't mean there's not depth there. And that they can mix and match when they want to. If they got a slow tackle out there, they can run a speed guy. If they got a guy who can't handle a bull rush, they'll get their best bull rush route there. I think they're just going to try to mix and match in that way and generate pass rush because there's not a guy who I think can do all things and be all things. It'd be nice to have that. Alabama's had the luxury of having that a lot during Nick Saban's tenure, but that just does not appear to be the case this year.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to the whole we kind of have to see it first to really see what these guys are talking about. One of the downfalls of not getting to watch the scrimmage is, I think we all know that Tim Keenan's pretty dang good. We all think Jaheim Otis and Tim Smith are pretty dang good. I think I still want to see a little bit out of the Bandits. They were another one of my prove it guys or prove it position groups, I suppose, from the last show. But clearly the Wolves are doing enough that the coaches at least feel good based on what they've seen so far. And I really just want to see the whole operation come together. So I just want to see it. Like, that's probably where a lot of this lingering question stems from. Like, I'm ready to watch some ball. I want to see what this Alabama team looks like. And as we've discussed before, and we'll discuss further both this week and next week, the first couple of weeks sets up to allow them, I think, to show a lot or experiment a little bit so long as they take care of business on the scoreboard.
And this is not a revelatory thought, but there are guys who practice really well and don't perform as well in the games, and there's a flip-flop of that. So it would not surprise me if we get a guy who, when the lights come on, can establish himself. It's just not there right now.
I think that makes sense. That's all I really had for today's show, guys. We'll be back sometime later this week to really kind of start to break down Alabama's offense and defense, things that we're looking forward to in the upcoming season. And then next week, we're going to circle back the first game week of the 2024 season, guys. We are this close.
Finally.
Next week is when we'll circle back with our actual game-by-game predictions, and we can be held to the fire a little bit, and we'll all predict how we think Alabama's going to do this upcoming fall. But, yeah, we'll be back later this week, going to dig in a little bit more into the offensive defense and maybe also some final takeaways or thoughts from the final week of Alabama's fall camp. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 24/7 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 24/7 and 24/7 Sports. You can get 30% off an annual VIP membership, which is a year's worth of our coverage and content for less than $10. You should absolutely take advantage of that. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We'll talk to you all again soon.